Well, good morning. I'm Brent Adams here with your Rural Strong Morning Ag Report for this Friday, September 29th, the 272nd day of 2023. Leading off the headlines this morning, lawmakers want limits or bans on farmland buys by China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. But USDA official tells the Senate Ag Committee that Congress never gave it the money to modernize the reporting system started with a 1978 law. USDA Deputy Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation, Gloria Montaño Green.
The Consolidated Appropriation Act did designate that USDA needed to modernize the APHIDA reporting system within 3 years and make it an online system. We did not receive any funding to be able to implement that.
Instead, Montaño Green told the Senate Ag Committee her agency simply uploaded a searchable Excel file, the cheapest way to comply with last year's Farmland Security Act that updated the earlier Ag Foreign Investment Disclosure Act. Lawmakers have since offered nearly 24 bills to restrict farmland buys and leasing, broaden reporting requirements and penalties, and ban farm payments to foreign holders. One bill aimed at China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea is part of the pending National Defense Bill. Montana farmer and Senator Jon Tester.
When we're talking about somebody like the Chinese Communist Party putting up a corn milling plant within miles of a sensitive Air Force base, and our agencies can't do anything about it, we need to give them the authority. We need to make sure that this doesn't happen.
Tester in South Dakota's Mike Rounds would seat USDA on CFIUS, a National Security Investment Review Panel. A House Ag spending bill does the same. Other lawmakers seek to put their measures on the Farm Bill. Separately, Iowa Republican Joni Ernst complained there is no farm bill.
I would be remiss not to express my frustration that we do not have at this time meaningful progress on the farm bill. We are set to let the 2018 Farm Bill expire in 3 days.
Ag Chair Debbie Stabenow responded.
We are diligently working on the Farm Bill. I've been involved in 6 of them. None of them, unfortunately, have ever hit the exact deadline.
But some ag senators and others predict the need for a 1-year farm bill extension amid the political turmoil over spending, a dwindling legislative calendar this year, and a possible government shutdown. Well, the American Farm Bureau Federation and 21 other agriculture groups are urging lawmakers to find a bipartisan path forward in the ongoing appropriations process to avoid a government shutdown. Sam Kiefer, American Farm Bureau Federation Vice President for Public Policy, says the letter was sent to leadership of the House and Senate,
encouraging them to approach the appropriations process in a bipartisan manner and do everything they can to avert a government shutdown. Not only do we need to keep government moving, but just as important, the longer we delay this current process, the less time there is to consider the important piece of legislation called the Farm Bill, which expires in less than a few days.
Kiefer says their message to Congress is simple,
urging Congress to find a bipartisan path forward that avoids the government shutdown and addresses federal government funding without additional delay, because we need to get to a Farm Bill conversation. There are very few days left in the congressional calendar this year, and we certainly want to get a Farm Bill conversation underway and a Farm Bill passed before presidential election cycle starts in 2024.
Kiefer says farmers and ranchers need a modern farm bill.
The current farm bill that was signed into law in 2018 is an effective piece of legislation, but the situation now with regard to operating costs and farm inputs is significantly different than it was in 2018. And we need to take the opportunity for Congress to have a robust conversation and consider investments into the piece of legislation that is in place to make sure that farm and ranch families have a safety net.
That's Sam Kiefer, American Farm Bureau Federation Vice President for Public Policy. Well, we've had some time to digest last week's Cattle on Feed report, which offered no major surprises beyond the slow pace of liquidation, according to Oklahoma State University Extension livestock marketing specialist, Dr. Daryl Peel.
Yeah, no big surprises in this report. We had marketings in the month of August down 6%, 94% of last year. Placements were 95% of last year, and the on-feed total coming into September was down about 2%, 98% of last year. For me personally, if there was any surprise in the report, and it's not a big surprise, and that's just the fact that it's been a slow process.
Last October, Peel says, was when year-over-year decreases began.
So as we go forward, if we continue this trend, even if it's only a couple percent below a year earlier, in, sort of compounded on a year-over-year basis, that means we're going to be pulling cattle numbers down a little bit faster. So, but we're clearly working our way into tighter numbers. That's the really important point as we go forward.
Placement numbers in the most recent report and a few reports prior have been under a year ago.
One of the reasons the placements have stayed relatively high, they are down pretty consistently, but they've stayed, as high as they can be, I guess I would say, and that's simply because feedlots obviously would like to maintain inventories. They're trying to keep their lots full, keep the feed mills working. They can. It's just that over time it's going to be harder and harder as these cattle numbers continue to tighten.
Total slaughter for the year so far is down about 3.9%. Beef production, he said, is down 5% for the year, with the exception of beef production to drop another 6 to 8% next year. With beef prices at record levels, Peel says time will tell if consumers will be willing to continue to pay more as supplies continue to tighten.
So some consumers are not going to buy as much beef, but that's just because there isn't beef out there. And we'll probably see higher prices. That's kind of the way markets work here when we get into tighter supplies. But there are limits, and certainly we'll continue to push against that upper limit as hard as we can for the foreseeable future.
That's Oklahoma State University Extension livestock marketing specialist, Dr. Daryl Peel. A special thanks to Ron Hayes with the Radio Oklahoma Network for that audio. Well, USDA's quarterly hogs and pigs report reflects a slight uptick in hog inventory over the previous quarter, but why? Here were some answers as USDA Radio's Rod Bain.
Perhaps a surprise to hog industry analysts after USDA Thursday issued its latest quarterly hogs and pigs report, the nation's wide inventory.
All hogs and pigs number on September 1st of 74.3 million head.
USDA livestock analyst Shale Shagum says while that represents a 0.4% increase from the June quarterly forecast,
if we look at what the industry analysts were expecting in terms of the June-August pig crop, they were actually expecting to see a decline.
While farrowing intentions are expected to be lower in the next 2 quarters, the rise in inventory was due to a significant increase in pigs per litter from the previous quarter.
This is in fact the second quarter when we've seen a pigs per litter of about 4% above year earlier.
Breeding inventory was down quarter over quarter by 1%, while market hog inventory was up slightly from the previous quarter. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
And finally this morning, the last U.S. drought monitor for September shows expanding drought coverage across the country and in several states since the beginning of the month. Here again is Rod Bain.
Despite cooler temperatures, drought coverage has expanded nationwide. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says for the 4-week period ending September 26th,
we have seen a 4 percentage point increase in drought coverage across the lower 48 states. The current number is 38% of the lower 48 covered by drought. That is up from 34% 4 weeks ago on August 29th. And that's a doubling of the U.S. drought coverage since we hit a 3-year low of 19% back on May 30th.
Flash drought in the eastern Corn Belt and worsening dryness in the lower Mississippi Valley are contributors to the latest drought coverage increase. Rippey adds,
we see an increasing array of states reporting the highest levels of drought, that extreme to exceptional drought.
With impacted areas including the Pacific Northwest, a stretch of southern tier states from Arizona to Alabama, and an area of the western Corn Belt. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Well, you can keep up with the latest in the world of agriculture by subscribing to the Tractors and Troubadours podcast from Rural Strong Media. Each week, I bring you agriculture industry newsmakers, hot-button industry issues, educational features, and the best in traditional country music. The Tractors and Troubadours podcast can be found at ruralstrongmedia.com or wherever you get your podcasts. We also invite you to join us daily on Rural Strong Radio, our 24/7 streaming radio station found at ruralstrongmedia.com or on the Live 365 streaming radio app for your mobile device. Each day, we bring you award-winning agriculture programming, as well as the best in traditional country music, mixed in with a little bluegrass, western swing, southern rock, and inspirational music. Again, the place to find Rural Strong Radio is ruralstrongmedia.com or on the Live 365 streaming radio app. We're portable, so take us with you everywhere you go this harvest season. We'll get you through those long, challenging days this fall. Well, I'll be back again on Monday with another Rural Strong Morning Ag Report here on Steve Shetler Media. Make it a great weekend, everybody.